The sun hadn't yet risen over the city skyline when Officer Rachel Dunn pulled into the precinct's rear parking lot. The air was still, the streets quiet, and the sky barely tinged with orange. In the back seat, Rex, her canine partner and closest companion, sat upright, his intelligent amber eyes scanning the perimeter, tail thumping once on the seat as Rachel shut off the engine. She glanced back and smiled. "Ready to make me look good again today, partner?" Rex gave a low, eager bark in response. Rachel had been with the force for over 12 years, most of it spent slogging through bureaucratic nonsense and losing faith in what the badge used to mean. But Rex changed that. In the 3 years since, they'd been partnered. They'd uncovered more drugs, weapons, and missing persons than any duo on the team. He wasn't just a dog. He was a detector of lies, of fear, of things people tried to hide. She trusted his instincts more than she trusted most of her colleagues. That morning, they were assigned to a routine sweep of Pier 41, a shipping yard flagged for suspicious container activity. Rachel had done dozens of these checks, usually boring, often fruitless. But 30 minutes into the patrol, Rex stopped cold in front of a stack of fertilizer bags wrapped in blue tarp. His tail stopped wagging. His body went stiff. Then he growled. "What you got?" Rachel asked, lowering to one knee. Rex barked once, pawed the ground, then barked again, his signal for a narcotics alert. Rachel radioed it in. Within the hour, forensics and customs. Officers unearthed over 800 pounds of heroin hidden beneath false-bottomed bags, carefully packed and nearly invisible without a scent-trained K9. The bust made headlines by noon. At the precinct, Rex was hailed as a hero. Officers came by to give him treats, pats, and high-fives to Rachel. "You sure he's not half bloodhound?" joked Officer Mason. "That nose is magic." Rachel smiled but kept her praise measured. "It's not magic. He just never misses." That weekend, a department commendation ceremony was held. Medals were pinned, speeches were made, and Rachel stood proudly beside Rex at the front of the banquet room, watching officers in full-dress uniform gather for the celebration. But as they walked toward the podium, something changed. Rex stopped mid-step. His ears snapped forward, muscles tightening like coiled springs. His nose lifted, twitching. Rachel followed his gaze. At the far side of the room stood a tall officer in crisp blues, arms crossed, expression unreadable. His name tag read, Creel. In a flash, Rex growled low, then lunged. Rachel jerked the leash, hard, stopping him just before he surged forward. The entire room went still. "Rex!" she snapped. He strained, teeth bared, fur bristling, all focus locked on Creel. The officer raised his hands in mock surrender, smiling nervously. "Easy, buddy. I'm on your side." Some chuckled awkwardly. Chief Morano stepped forward, his voice steady but with a sharp edge. "Control your dog, Dunn." Rachel managed to pull Rex back, kneeling beside him as he continued to snarl low under his breath. His eyes never left Creel. "Sorry, sir," she muttered. He's never done that before." Creel waved it off. "No harm done. Must have smelled something funky on me." Rachel forced a tight smile, but inside unease prickled her spine. Rex had been exposed to hundreds of strangers, civilians, suspects, prisoners. He never reacted like that unless something was wrong. After the ceremony, Rachel tried to approach Creel for small talk. He kept it brief, just enough to be polite. No warmth, no curiosity. And his scent, something about it was off. Not bad. Just artificial, like latex gloves over rot. Back at her unit, Rachel crouched next to Rex, who remained on edge, pacing the room. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. "What did you smell on him?" Rex didn't respond. But Rachel could see it in his eyes. He was certain of one thing, that man in uniform. He didn't belong, and whatever he was hiding, Rex wasn't going to let it go. The precinct buzzed for days after the heroin bust. Local media called it the biggest drug interception in a decade, and Rachel's name was mentioned alongside Rex's in every article. While the attention wasn't her thing, she was proud of her partner and wary of how quickly the spotlight could turn. But under the praise, a quiet tension settled in Rachel's chest. Since the ceremony, Rex had changed, only slightly but enough that she noticed. He was more alert, more restless, especially around the station. Every time they passed Officer Creel in the halls, Rex's reaction was the same. Bristled fur, stiff posture and a warning growl low in his throat. Rachel tried brushing it off. Could be a new detergent, she joked to Mason one afternoon. Or maybe Creel just smells like bad vibes. But in private, the behavior gnawed at her. Rex didn't make mistakes. He didn't bark without reason. And now, every time they neared Creel, it was like he sensed something that didn't belong. Rachel decided to dig. She started with Creel's personnel file. On the surface, it was squeaky clean, transferred from New York's 108th precinct 3 months ago. Commendations, no red flags. But something didn't sit right. The photo on his ID, perfectly centered, expression bland. His references were all out of state. There wasn't a single connection tying him to anyone on their current force. She flagged it mentally but said nothing. Later that night, Rachel stayed late, finishing reports and feeding Rex in the precinct kennel. Just after 11 p.m., she heard a noise, soft paws tapping on tile. She turned and saw Rex trotting toward her, tail stiff, ears high. "What are you doing out of your crate?" she asked. She hadn't opened it. He barked once, sharp and insistent, then trotted toward the exit. Rachel followed. Rex led her 3 blocks away, down a back alley near a rundown strip of auto garages and abandoned shops. The wind howled between buildings. Rex stopped at a rusted metal door, sniffed the handle, then growled again. Rachel tested it. Locked. She jimmied the side latch with her knife. The door creaked open. Inside, the air reeked of chemicals and dust. A single bulb hung from the ceiling. In the center of the space was a makeshift table covered in a tarp. Rachel stepped in carefully, flashlight sweeping the dark. Then she saw them. Police uniforms, folded neatly. Multiple sizes, some with her precinct patch, others blank. Next to them, a case of burner phones, a duffel bag full of cash, and a folder filled with black and white surveillance photos. Photos of her, taken from different angles, on different days. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. She grabbed her phone and started snapping pictures. But before she could finish, Rex began to bark, loud, frantic. His body blocked the door, nose twitching. She spun. Someone was outside. The sound of retreating footsteps echoed down the alley. By the time she got to the door, no one was there. She called it in immediately. Within 10 minutes, officers arrived to secure the scene. Rachel briefed the night lieutenant and turned in her report, but by morning everything was gone. She returned to the scene with Mason, only to find the unit cleaned out. No uniforms, no cash, no photos, nothing but dust. The lieutenant looked at her flatly. "You sure this is the place?" Rachel nodded. "I took pictures, on my phone." Her phone was missing from evidence. The official statement? No confirmation of illegal activity. Possible trespassing. End of report. When Rachel pressed the matter, she was warned. Don't start making noise about fellow officers. You'll only isolate yourself. By that afternoon, the whispers had started, behind her back, in the locker room, at the coffee machine. That evening, Creel passed her in the hallway. He smiled politely, leaned in slightly and whispered just loud enough for her to hear, "You should keep your dog on a tighter leash, Officer Dunn. He's bound to sniff the wrong trail one of these days." Rachel stood frozen, heart pounding. But Rex at her side was already growling low, like he knew something was about to break wide open. Rachel didn't sleep that night. She replayed Creel's words over and over in her head. He's bound to sniff the wrong trail. It wasn't a threat, not directly. But it had the quiet chill of a man who wasn't bluffing. The kind of calm that meant confidence. Control. The following morning, Rachel arrived early and found a note pinned to her locker. "Paranoia doesn't suit you." It wasn't signed. No handwriting she recognized. She tore it down and crumpled it, but the damage was done. Whoever left it knew exactly where she changed, when she arrived, and that she was watching. Rex, sitting just outside the locker room door as always, gave a low, disapproving whine. Rachel knelt and rubbed his ears. "I know, buddy, we're..." being watched. Later that day, she requested access to internal security footage. The precinct had cameras nearly everywhere, especially in storage zones and common spaces. But when she went to retrieve footage from the alley where the storage unit had been cleared, the files were missing, corrupted, according to the IT supervisor. Could have been a glitch. 2 corrupted cameras, one coincidentally located near the garage, the other outside the K9 unit's kennel. Rachel's blood ran cold. It wasn't paranoia. Someone was scrubbing her trail. That night, after most of the department had gone home, Rachel stayed behind with Rex. She wandered to the old records room under the guise of updating her K9 tracking logs. Instead, she sifted through locker assignments and gear requisitions, anything with Creel's name. Nothing stood out until she found a logbook from 2 months ago, a shipment of tactical gear logged under Creel's badge ID. What caught her attention wasn't the gear. It was who had signed off on the delivery, Officer Hal Watkins. But Hal had died in a traffic accident last year. Rachel's heart kicked into overdrive. Creel was using old, inactive badge numbers, IDs that should have been scrubbed. It was the kind of trick a mole would use, someone inside the system, gaming it from within. She snapped a photo of the logbook with her backup phone, slipped it into her coat, and left. As she walked past the quiet locker room on her way out, she stopped. Inside, a faint noise. A soft shuffle. Rachel cracked the door. Creel stood at the far end, in front of her locker. It was slightly open. He didn't flinch when she stepped in. "Problem?" she asked, her voice cold. He turned slowly. "Locker assignments got shuffled. Thought this was mine." Rachel smiled. "You know, I could report that." "You could," he said, eyes narrowing slightly. "But then you'd have to explain what you've been doing snooping through requisitions that aren't in your department." A beat passed between them, sharp as broken glass. Then Creel leaned in, voice dropping low. "You think you're the only one sniffing around here, Officer Dunn?" Before she could reply, he was gone. Brisk steps, door swinging shut behind. Him! Rachel stood frozen, breath short. She didn't know how long she was alone before Rex appeared beside her, having slipped the leash to find her again. "I don't know what we're in the middle of," she whispered to him, "but I know you're right about him." Rex bumped his head against her leg and sat, watchful, still, like a sentinel waiting for the signal to move. Whatever was coming next, they'd face it together, and someone inside the department had just made it personal. The next day began like any other. Coffee, roll call, assignment briefings, but Rachel felt the shift. Conversations stopped when she entered a room. Eyes followed her longer than usual. It wasn't overt. It was worse. Subtle. She was being watched from within her own house. Still, she pressed on. She knew the logbook entry she'd found was a thread worth pulling. If Creel had used a dead officer's badge ID to requisition gear, it meant someone was helping him forge internal documentation, maybe more. She needed someone to talk to. Someone outside the inner circle, so she called in a favor. Detective Elias Corder was an old academy classmate, now working special investigations across town. Not technically internal affairs, but smart, honest, and cautious. Exactly what Rachel needed. They met after hours at a diner near the outskirts of the city. Rex sat beside her booth, alert and silent. "You sure this isn't just internal pressure getting to you?" Elias asked after hearing her out. "People get weird about praise. Maybe Creel's jealous." Rachel slid her phone across the table. Photos of the requisition log, the surveillance photos of her from the storage unit. Then she added, "And Rex doesn't growl unless there's something to growl at." Elias studied the photos in silence, then nodded slowly. "All right, I'll do some checking." Quietly. "Start with Creel's transfer," she said. "Something's not right. I want to know who signed off on it." They parted an hour later, agreeing to stay off email and phones. Everything would be in person from now on. But when Rachel called Elias the next day, he didn't pick up, nor the next. By the third day, she drove to his apartment. It was empty, furniture gone, no signs of a struggle, just erased, like he'd never lived there. She filed a missing persons report, but even that got buried under pending status. No follow-ups, no urgency. Back at the precinct, she confronted the records officer. "Cordo's report isn't logged. I filed it 3 days ago." He looked up, confused. "No, you didn't. We have no report under your name." She stared at the screen. Blank. Like her concern had never existed. Rachel stormed out and paced the stairwell. Rex sat beside her, head tilted in concern. "They're scrubbing everything," she whispered, like none of it ever happened. That night, Rachel drove to her childhood home, an hour outside the city. Her parents were long gone, the house now a quiet retreat she barely visited. But she needed a place where the walls didn't have ears. She laid out everything on the kitchen table. Printed photos, old notes, copies of the requisition log, screenshots from the precinct's internal database. And she noticed something. Every falsified requisition tied back to a single item, unmarked tactical gear. And every one of them was routed through a small, low-security evidence lockup on the city's south end. A facility usually meant for overflow and junk. Old narcotics cases, scrapped weapons, too low profile to monitor closely. "Let's take a ride," she told Rex. It was nearly midnight when she arrived. The place was dim, surrounded by chain link, fencing. She parked 2 blocks away, approached on foot with Rex at her side. The facility looked dead quiet, until Rex froze. He gave that same stiff-bodied posture. His nose pointed to the side of the building, where a ventilation duct ran up the wall. Rachel followed his gaze. Then she saw it. A faint glimmer, a reflection of metal under the moonlight. Someone was up there, watching. She ducked behind a dumpster, heart pounding. A second figure moved, fast, agile, and slipped down the fire escape. Rachel barely had time to unholster her sidearm before the figure bolted into the darkness. She gave chase. Rex leapt ahead of her, his paws pounding pavement. The figure sprinted into an alley, vaulted a fence, but Rachel was close. Rex faster. They cornered the suspect near a dead-end lot behind a bakery. Rex lunged, bringing the figure down. Rachel moved in, flashlight beam locking onto a face, and froze. It wasn't Creel, it was someone else. In a police uniform with no badge number, no name tag, just a symbol on the shoulder patch she didn't recognize. And in the man's hand, a list of names. Rachel's name was at the top. Rachel stared down at the man sprawled on the asphalt, breath wheezing under Rex's weight. His uniform looked official, but up close it was off. Fabric too new, the stitching on the patches slightly crooked, and no identifying information. Beyond a strange geometric black and silver insignia on his shoulder, she yanked the list from his hand. It was printed on standard issue precinct paper, but the font was wrong, slightly narrower, tighter. Forged. She scanned the names. Hers was at the top, below it, Elias Cordo, the detective who'd vanished. Then, 3 other names she didn't recognize. Rex barked sharply. The man beneath him began to squirm. Rachel pressed a knee into his back. "Who gave you this?" The man didn't speak, just looked at her with cold, defiant eyes. She pulled out her phone, snapped a photo of the list and the patch, then quickly cuffed him. "You're going to answer some questions, and if you don't, my partner here gets first crack." He smirked, blood at the corner of his mouth. "Your partner's the reason this all started." Rachel froze. "What?" The man didn't say more, but the words stuck in her head like a blade. "Your partner's the reason this all started." She radioed in the arrest, only to get static. No response. No dispatch. Nothing. It was as if she were calling into dead air. Rachel loaded the man into her back seat, Rex seated beside him like a quiet executioner. Instead of driving back to the precinct, she turned toward a nearby fire station she trusted. Firehouse 92, an old building run by men and women who didn't take orders from the PD. But halfway there, the man in the back began to convulse. Rachel slammed on the brakes. "Hey, what's happening?" His eyes rolled back. Foam began to gather at the corners of his mouth. Rex barked, pawing at the partition. Rachel ripped open the back door, yanked the man out, and tried to stabilize him, but it was too late. He went limp. In her arms, she checked for a pulse. Gone, she opened his mouth, nothing inside. No capsules, no foaming tablets, just death, a professional kill switch. One that activated silently and ended clean. Rachel stared at the lifeless body on the ground. her breath misting in the cold air. They'd sent him knowing he wouldn't. Come back. A one-way mission to deliver a warning. She felt eyes on her. From the shadows across the street, a dark SUV idled. Then it pulled away, headlights off. Someone had watched the whole thing. She didn't chase. Instead, she burned rubber toward the firehouse and flagged down Chief Lenny, a grizzled vet with no patience for politics. "Lenny," she said, hauling the body out of the back seat. "I need your cold storage and 5 minutes to explain." He didn't ask questions, just ushered her in. She told him everything, about Creel, the missing evidence, the erased files, Elias's disappearance, the man with the fake uniform. When she showed him the patch and the list, he frowned. "That symbol, it ain't department issue, but I've seen it." "Where?" He hesitated. "A few years back, we responded to a chemical fire at an old warehouse. PD told us to stand down before we even got in. That patch was on the jackets. Of the cleanup crew, no names, no ranks." Rachel's stomach turned. This wasn't just one dirty cop, it was a network, organized, quiet, embedded, and now she was on their radar. As she left the firehouse that night, her phone buzzed. A text. "Unknown number. You're getting too close. Take a leave, walk away, or he dies." Rachel didn't drive back to the precinct. She sat frozen in her car outside Firehouse 92, staring at the photo on her phone. Rex, asleep in his crate, unaware he was being watched. The timestamp was from 10 minutes ago. He was still inside the station, still safe, for now. But the message was clear. Walk away, or we hurt the dog. She clenched her jaw, fighting panic. Someone had penetrated the K9 unit, likely with a key or a badge. No cameras, no alarm. Whoever it was had authority, access, and no fear of consequences. This wasn't just intimidation. It was a test. She could back down, file for leave, vanish into the quiet like Elias had, or she could push forward and risk everything. She hit the gas. 20 minutes later, Rachel pulled into the back lot of the precinct, killing the headlights and ducking behind the dumpster. She'd called in a false alarm to the front desk, something about a suspicious package on the south end of the lot, to draw eyes away from the K9 unit. The bait worked. She slipped in through the side maintenance entrance, crept down the dim corridor, and headed straight for the kennels. The security system hadn't flagged her, either because she was still officially one of them, or because the person behind this didn't see her as a threat anymore. They'd underestimated her. Inside, the K9 wing was eerily quiet. Only the hum of fluorescent lights above and the faint rustling of paws in crates. She approached Rex's kennel. He was awake now, head up, ears alert, tail still. He didn't bark. He knew. She opened the door silently, and Rex slipped out, pressing close to her leg. "Good boy," she whispered. "We're going ghost." She clipped on his lead, but he didn't move. His head turned, sharp, focused, toward the far end of the hallway. Rachel followed his gaze. The security door to the utility stairwell was cracked open. She reached for her sidearm. Then, a whisper of movement. Someone was watching. She didn't. "Wait!" She bolted. With Rex beside her, she sprinted through the stairwell and down the emergency exit into the garage. A beat later, footsteps echoed above. They were being followed. Rex growled once, then lunged ahead, cutting between parked cruisers and leading her toward her unmarked SUV. She hit the remote unlock just as two shadows burst through the upper doors. No time for subtlety. She shoved open the back. Rex leapt in and she gunned the engine, tires screeching as she burst into the night. Bullets clipped the rear bumper. They drove through 3 red lights and took every back road she knew. By the time she reached her destination, a forgotten hunting cabin her father used to bring her to as a child, her hands were still shaking. She parked behind the tree line, killed the engine, and sat there for a full minute, breathing hard. Rex licked her hand once, as if to say, "We made it." For now. Inside the cabin, Rachel locked the door, barricaded it with old furniture, and set up a makeshift war room. She spread everything out across the old dining table, the list, the logbook, the insignia photo, and the map she'd pulled. From station archives of all the warehouses the department had ever condemned or claimed. There was one pattern. Every warehouse connected to falsified requisitions or illegal evidence reroutes had one thing in common: They were all seized narcotics, sites that went dark after busts. Officially marked inactive, they were never logged for follow-up destruction or repurposing. And Creel? His transfer came in just after the last major drug raid tied to one of those sites. She circled a location on the map. An old textile mill south of the river, abandoned after a fire 2 years ago. And suddenly it clicked. They weren't infiltrating the police force. They were building a shadow version of it, using fake uniforms, dead IDs, seized equipment, and... The real force was unknowingly guarding their supply line. Rachel looked at Rex. This isn't just a cover-up, it's a full-blown double force, and we're going to tear it down. Rex growled once, quiet but fierce. The game wasn't about survival anymore, it was about exposure, and someone was about to find out what happens when a K9 and his partner stop following the rules. Attached was a photo. Rex, sleeping in his crate, inside. The police station. Rachel's hands went ice-cold. They were watching everything. And if she didn't act fast, she'd lose the only partner she could still trust. Rachel didn't sleep that night. She and Rex lay in shifts on the cold cabin floor, her sidearm clutched tight, eyes fixed on the boarded windows. The truth now sat heavy on the table beside them. Photographs, maps, names, and the blueprint. Of a covert force built under the city's nose. A fake police network funded by stolen evidence, protected by forged identities, and hidden in plain sight. And the worst part? No one in the official chain of command could be trusted. At sunrise, Rachel suited up, not in uniform, but in plain black tactical gear with no identifiers. Just a body cam, a comms mic taped discreetly inside her collar, and a thumb drive tucked into her boot. Inside the drive was everything. The list, the photos, Creel's logs, even the footage of the man who died in her back seat. She planned to hand it all to a federal contact. But first she had to prove it on camera. She'd go straight to the source, the textile mill. The drive was a 2-hour trek through back roads, Rex quiet beside her in the passenger seat, his eyes scanning the trees like he knew this mission wasn't like the others. Rachel had downloaded a GPS scrambler app and ran silent. No phones, no open comms. Nothing that could be traced. When she finally reached the perimeter of the old warehouse, she parked 2 blocks away and advanced on foot through brush and weeds, using a drainage ditch for cover. The mill loomed ahead, burnt brick walls, blackened windows, vines curling through shattered doorways. But someone had been here recently. Tracks in the mud, fresh tire marks. A bent piece of fencing near the back entrance. She crouched low behind a rusted dumpster and tapped the small button on her body cam. Recording, she whispered. Suspected covert operation site, entering alone. Dog unit in backup formation. Gave a low huff, his muscles taut. They moved. The back door was unlocked. She eased it open, flashlight held low. Inside, the air was stale with the scent of rot and old ash, but there was something else, something fresher, gun oil, cleaning solvent, leather. Rachel swept room by room, whisper quiet. Stacks of crates lined the far wall. One was cracked open. Inside were tactical vests marked police and SWAT in clean stenciled white, but the tags were wrong. Cheap material, mass-produced. She opened another crate, weapons, assault rifles, smoke grenades, radios. It was an arsenal. Suddenly Rex froze. His ears snapped forward. Then he turned and growled low, not at a person but at the air vent above. Rachel ducked just as a burst of suppressed gunfire sprayed the crate beside her. It was a trap. She rolled behind cover as masked figures emerged from the shadows, uniformed, but patchless, fast and coordinated. One moved for the exit, clearly trying to flank. Rex leapt, taking him down with a roar of fury. Rachel returned fire, controlled and sharp. She didn't aim to kill, she aimed to wound, to stall, to extract. But there were too many. She activated the second camera in her vest, sending a live feed to the drive in her boot. If she didn't make it out, someone had to find the truth. Then, from the far stairwell, a voice. "Drop it, done, Creel." He stepped into view, unmasked, calm, his weapon aimed square at her chest. "You just couldn't leave it alone." Rachel stood slowly, keeping her hands half raised. "What is this, Creel? Some backdoor paramilitary?" He smirked. Not backdoor. We're the future. The ones who actually clean up the streets. No red tape, no politics, just order. She shook her head. You're trafficking weapons, running black ops out of abandoned buildings. People are disappearing. He stepped closer. They were in the way, like you. At that moment, a sharp bark. Rex reappeared behind Creel, having slipped around the crates. Rachel didn't hesitate. Rex, bite! The dog launched. Chaos erupted. Rachel dove, tackled Creel just as Rex locked onto his arm. Guns fired. Shouts echoed. And outside, sirens. Loud. Real federal agents. Rachel's backup plan had worked. She'd sent a dead man ping to her contact right before entering the warehouse. And now, the cavalry had arrived. Red and blue lights bathed the crumbling walls of the warehouse as armored vans screeched to a halt outside. Federal agents in riot gear flooded the structure, shouting orders. Rachel pressed her body over Creel's, keeping his weapon pinned to the floor as Rex maintained his grip. On his arm, the remaining imposter officers dropped their weapons. A few tried to run, but were tackled and cuffed before they could escape into the trees. "Agent Dunlow, FBI," a voice called through the chaos. "Clear for extraction." Rachel looked up as a tall woman in a dark tactical vest approached, flanked by agents. "You Rachel Dunn?" Rachel nodded, chest heaving. "You got the signal?" "We got everything," the agent replied, lifting a small tablet. On it played the entire live body cam feed, from the hidden crates to Creel's. "Confession. Backup was already en route after your drop at the fire station," Dunlow added. "Your partner did one hell of a job sniffing this thing out." Rex gave a proud huff, still standing over Creel, whose face twisted in rage and pain. "You don't get it," Creel spat. "We were cleaning the city up. You're stopping progress." Rachel leaned in, voice low. "You were building a fake army to terrorize people who couldn't fight back. You wore the badge but never earned it." She stood, finally letting the feds take Creel into custody. The warehouse was now a live crime scene, agents cataloging weapons, photographing documents, and tagging every item. Rachel watched them work with a hollow mix of satisfaction and exhaustion. It was over, almost. She reached into her boot and handed the thumb drive to Agent Dunlow. "Every name, every location, every death they covered, it's all on there." Dunlow took it with a nod. "This changes a lot of things. Let's hope it changes the right ones." Outside, the early morning fog was beginning to lift. The light was golden, cutting through the trees as if slicing through the darkness that had blanketed the precinct for far too long. Rex sat beside her near the edge of the parking lot, leaning his weight gently against her hip. "You saved my life," she whispered, scratching behind his ear. "You saved a lot more than that." As dawn broke, reporters began to show up. News choppers circled overhead. The story spread fast. K9 officer uncovers rogue police operation. Fake cops, real crimes, dozens arrested in secret warehouse raid. Rachel stayed out of the cameras. Her name would surface eventually, but she didn't want the spotlight. She wanted one thing: justice. Later that day, she returned to the precinct, not in uniform, but on her own terms. Some officers stared. Some looked away. Chief Moreno met her at the front steps, eyes unreadable. "I heard what you did," he said gruffly. "Feds told me I was being kept out of the loop on purpose." "I didn't know who to trust," Rachel replied. He looked at her a long moment, then nodded. "Good call." She handed him her badge. "I'm taking some time." He accepted it with hesitation. "You earned more than time. You earned this department back." Rachel looked down at Rex, then back at Moreno. "I'll think about it, but for now we're going to disappear for a while, just until the smoke clears." As she walked away, Rex at her side, a familiar voice called out from the hallway behind. "Done." She turned. Detective Elias Cordo bruised, thinner but alive, flanked by two agents. "You're a hard woman to find," he said with a tired smile. "But you found me anyway." Rachel laughed once, tears burning her eyes. "You were on the list. I couldn't leave you behind. You didn't." He stepped forward. "And neither did your partner." Rex barked, tail wagging for the first time in days. Together the three walked out of the station, free of shadows. The badge was behind them, for now. But the truth they uncovered, that would echo through the city for years to come, and if corruption ever dared to rise again, a dog's nose would find it, the end.